This past week we got a movie set in space. You guys know I love space. Except this time there's no big purple aliens collecting space rocks to destroy the entire universe. Now it's a guy in space who's real sad about his dad, and he's just going through some stuff.
This is Major Roy McBride. I'm attempting to reach Dr. Clifford McBride. This is Dr. McBride's son. Dad, I'd like to see you again.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This week we are reviewing James Gray's new film Ad Astra, which stars Brad Pitt as an astronaut named Brad Astra, who was sent through space to find his father, Dad Astra, and stop him from destroying Earth. While that is a very loose explanation of Ad Astra's premise, it is not entirely wrong. So, Ad Astra is a film that is sort of supposed to be kind of a throwback to an era when sci-fi movies didn't have to be big budget, absurd spectacles. Although this film does have a large budget and it is being released by a mainstream studio, it is not exactly the kind of movie that has been getting put out much recently. James Gray's entire shtick as a filmmaker is he's kind of a throwback guy, sort of a meat and potatoes, like New York bred drama filmmaker who works well in genre, be it crime or, you know, other little experimentations throughout his filmography. And him doing a sci-fi movie is kind of like a big, big sea change. And this movie was supposed to come out a while ago, and it didn't come out until just now. And there are some controversial elements about the film and its like final product that we're going to talk about later. But going right into it, I just want to say I liked the film, and I do think it's really cool that it exists. Like, at the very least, at the very base level, I am stoked that Ad Astra is a movie that got made today and is on a lot of screens. It's a little bit of a cliche at this point to say this, but it's the kind of movie I think that we need more of. Even if I don't think it's perfect, and I think it has actually some considerable problems. So, getting right into it, like as I said, Ad Astra takes place in the near future. Brad Pitt is the lead actor. He plays Roy McBride, who's like this, badass astronaut who is like always calm under pressure, handles everything. And he's the son of a legend who was played by Tommy Lee Jones, who was like a pioneer in the future space program and went missing on a crazy expedition like years ago. So basically, Brad Pitt has not seen his father since he was like a teenager and has just been living this life where he's like really good at his job, but like nothing else. He can't keep relationships sustainable. He's probably a pretty fucked up, unhappy guy, but he's like, this sort of performative mask of like functional masculinity at all times. And very early on in the film, he gets sent on a mission where they explain to him, like, hey, actually, it turns out your dad is probably not dead. In fact, your dad probably lost his mind and is on Neptune, and he's been shooting, like, weird rays from that planet in our direction, and, like, it's just, if he keeps doing it, Earth's gonna die. So, like, you gotta go into space, and we need you to, like, send a message to your dad so he'll, in theory, stop trying to kill us all. And that's like the gist. The general gist is just Brad Pitt has to go into space to find his father and stop him from doing mad scientist shit. And it's a really cool concept. Like, when I originally saw the trailer, I thought it was going to be sort of like Apocalypse Now, but like in space, and like with fathers and sons and stuff. And I thought that could be really cool. But it's very different. It's a more meditative film, but it's not too meditative. Basically, the movie has this very straightforward 3-act structure. It's like very like linear, and it's only 2 hours. Like the movie seemed to be echoing enough of like Kubrick's 2001 to me to assume it would be sort of like a weird art house space movie. Something that's like way too long, has just long periods of quiet where people are just looking at stars, at that kind of movie. Like, I'm not a big 2001 guy. It's a cool movie, but I don't care about it at all. It's like not a touchstone for me whatsoever. So I was a little bit antsy thinking it was gonna be like that. But then I'd seen interviews and stuff where it seemed very clear that James Gray was trying to make a mainstream sci-fi movie. Like, he knew that he would have to get studio backing to fund a movie this big. And so he and his co-writer intended to create a story that was in that paradigm. Like, it's not meant to be like weird and divisive and artsy. It's just meant to be a real big movie, like for adults. That's not like pandering and like, like in the MCU vein or whatever. Which, hey, that's a cool thing to set out to do. The thing is, though, there's a lot in the movie to suggest that James Gray is good at this and should keep making movies in this vein. But there's been some tinkering to the movie, and like it's not 100% clear how much of this was James's own doing versus how much it was the studio's. It should be noted that this movie was going to be done through Fox, and then Disney bought Fox, and that is why the movie was delayed studio like release date wise. And it's probably, I just have this hunch that they're probably pretty involved with some of the changes that were made. So before we get into my complaints and stuff, good things about the movie. This was my third James Gray movie ever. I've never been into his films, so I never watched any of them. Before I saw Ad Astra earlier in the day, before I went to go see it, I watched The Lost City of Z, which I did not like. I thought it was very poorly structured and kind of bland, but there was some cool stuff in it. And I watched We Own the Night, which is much more my speed, and I quite liked it. Really, really good performances all around. Cool car chase, like good movie. So I didn't have like a lot of like, you know, what a James Gray movie is supposed to be going in. And then I watched Ad Astra, and I just really dug it in general. I feel like he didn't waste a lot of time getting right to the story. I thought visually it was really strong, and I thought that they did a really cool job of making space feel like realistic. Like, I guess if I'd watched this with a Neil deGrasse Tyson, he probably would have like ruined the whole movie for me. There's probably like important science stuff that like the movie gets wrong, but like it's a movie. I'm not crazy about stuff like that. I just mean that aesthetically, like it looked and felt like a reasonable extrapolation of our current space program in the near future. You know, it wasn't like crazy rocket ships and lasers and stuff. It was like pretty realistic looking space. Like the ships look kind of like what NASA looks like now, you know? And that's cool. And the fact that it was believable to me made it more engrossing. I mean, I like crazy, ridiculous space stuff too, don't get me wrong, but it was like, we haven't had a movie like this in a bit, I think. I feel like the last movie I can think of that had this sort of look was like Moon, and like Duncan Jones' film Moon with Sam Rockwell, and Moon was like a much smaller movie. So to me, this sort of felt like somewhat similar aesthetically to Moon, but larger and a little more adventurous too. Like the entire thing of him being on this mission, and we get to see like what the moon is like now, and there's like fucking subways on the moon, just typical post-capitalism bullshit. There's like pirates on the moon. There's a whole like car chase on the moon with the little like lunar rovers and like people just shooting each other. It's fucking one of the greatest scenes in movies this year. It's so cool. Like it's action packed and it's thrilling and it's suspenseful, but it's also like dudes shooting at each other on the moon. Like I was like, what? And that's what's cool about the movie. The movie has a couple of really great action bits and a couple of really great suspense bits and stuff. Like I'm not going to spoil all of them. But in between that, there's just a lot of Brad Pitt having to mentally process like a year, like a life's worth of issues with his father who's gone, and like all of his issues. They use this device throughout the movie that's somewhat similar to like the way Blade Runner 2049 works, where Kay has to keep doing that like thing with like the within cells interlinked thing, the baseline thing. So all the astronauts have to constantly do this like a psyche eval thing through like an AI that like checks to make sure they're still like good, because deeper space travel can really fuck you up, as every movie you've ever seen about space travel can tell you. And I feel like Gray does this really cool thing where at first this is just to kind of show us who this guy is, because the first few times he does his little psyche eval thing, it's like Brad Pitt, and like Brad Pitt is like a rock, and he's just very like cool and staid and just, you know, like I'm good, I slept for 8.2 hours and my heartbeat is great, and you're like, oh wow, this guy's like a beast. And even his higher ups are like, you know, talking about how like his BPM has never risen above 80, even when he was like falling from a space needle. Like he's just that badass. And those things are kind of shown as like virtues, you know, like, yeah, this is the job, and he doesn't have any personal connections because you don't want to inflict this life on anybody, yada, yada, yada. And then like the longer the movie lets you spend time with just Brad Pitt and his thoughts, you're like, oh, you're like super fucking repressed. You're like not okay, my guy. You got some like stuff going on, King. And the movie gives him space to kind of like work through those things. What's interesting to me is that it is kind of like, you know, a straightforward action thriller sci-fi thing. You know, it's about a guy going to stop his dad from killing like Earth. Like that's, you don't get more like obvious than that. But it's not really structured like that. There's not like a MacGuffin he's chasing, and he doesn't really fight like a bunch of villains along the way, really. Like, there's obstacles, things that naturally kind of pop up, but most of what he's fighting is just like himself and like his inability to like reason and function as an emotionally mature individual. So it sort of makes everything around it seem just like a metaphor for like therapy, which I thought was really cool. Like, I've seen some things online, like some takes about the movie, like, oh, another movie about a white dude and his dad, like more stuff about fathers and sons, and it's like a lot of, I mean, that's like a big thing, I think, for men in general, like, as fathers and sons and stuff, and like obviously that can be boring to some people because a lot of people write stories that use like the baked in drama of fathers and sons to not write anything new. Like, some people over rely on it and just sort of expect the audience to, like, you know, just project their own fucking daddy issues, I guess, into the movie. And I'm not a fan of that per se, but like in interviews, Grace talked about how, like, yeah, like, you know, when you show like two men who are friends or something, you have to spend time establishing their relationship and like how it came to be and what the issues are and stuff. Whereas the minute you introduce someone's father or their son, like, you immediately graft a lot of stuff onto it already, and then you can kind of go from there. You're able to kind of deal like with more like myth, you know, like so much of the movie feels kind of like a Joseph Campbell thing, but twisted, you know, like it follows a lot of the same beats, but like more in like a psychological way than actually doing like big triumphant cool hero moments. And I thought that was really cool. I mean, like, it doesn't take away from the moments that are more action packed, and then the action packed stuff doesn't take away from the interiority of Brad Pitt's journey. So it's like this really cool give and take. And I don't know, I like when movies engage and tell stories about masculinity on like a cool level that is not just simply like kind of like all men suck, or is not like pretending like they don't. You know what I mean? Like, I like when stuff is really kind of I talked about it in my video about Quentin Tarantino's new movie. You know what I mean? I really like the stuff again with Brad Pitt and Leo, like about their friendship, because I thought that was really interesting. Not a lot of movies do that anymore. And that's sort of how I feel a little bit here, only it's much, much more well executed. Like, I feel like James Gray's biggest gift as a filmmaker is, like, regardless of what genre he's working in, what kind of story he's telling, he really understands, like, people on like, a deep level, and, like, the way they interact with each other, and actors, and I think he does a really good job of being able to, like, take the nugget of something really emotional between people, whether it be often family members, sometimes friendships, sometimes relationships, and like making that sustain a whole movie, versus some people will start on the outer with like plot and like ideas and stuff, and then try to figure out an arc underneath that. And I feel like he starts with the core of the people, and then the other stuff kind of comes in and out of it. And I like that approach quite a bit. I'm not like super in the bag for him. Some of his, I have now, at the time of recording this, watched all of his movies vastly out of order like an idiot. I really like Two Lovers a lot. Little Odessa is cool. The Yards is cool, but like I'm not like, nah, this guy's amazing. You know, The Immigrant's good too. Any movie where Jeremy Renner gets stabbed is good in my book. And you know, I like that. I like that approach. I really dig it. Super, super tight. Like, this is like my kind of movie. Super feel great about recommending this to people. But additionally, this movie is not like the movie I think that James Gray set out to make, because there's a couple of really grating things about it. Really, primarily, the main thing that is like the biggest issue I have with the movie is that Brad Pitt as an actor is like super underrated. I think that if he was like an ugly ass dude, we would all think of him as like the greatest American actor of like a very long time. You know, he's so good. But because he's like such a hunk, he kind of has to work within that hunky facade at all times. He's like a character actor trapped in like a hunk's body, you know. And as such, he's a pretty interesting leading man. He doesn't always get roles that fully tax his abilities, in my opinion. I think that his turn in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is fantastic. And I think his turn here is equally good for different reasons, except for the fact that in nearly every scene, he is also doing voiceover narration to explain the movie. And it is nearly universally terrible narration. Narration, in general, in a movie is not the worst thing, in my opinion.
Well, isn't that just the risk one takes for attempting something new? I should leave here right now. I'll start over. I need to face this project head on
And God help you if you use voiceover in your work, my friends. God help you. It's flaccid, sloppy writing.
I know Robert McKee disagrees, but I do think that voiceover in a movie is really cool if you use it the way, like, thought captions and stuff are used in comics. Like, in a comic book, right? You would show like an art, like there's panels and drawings, so you would not need someone with a thought bubble to like say some shit that the panel shows you. You should never have a thing in a comic where it's like a guy walking down the street and then in the caption it's like, and he was walking down the street, like you can see that. In the caption, you would want to put something else, maybe it's like internal monologue or something that you cannot show, so you can create like new ideas from the juxtaposition of the images and those words. Like that's like the idea, right? Obviously, in a movie, ideally, the best kind of movie could work with no dialogue, no narration whatsoever. So if you're going to have dialogue and you're going to have narration, they should be at odds with one another in some way, and they should add something that the visual purely on its own cannot. So, like, Terrence Malick is, like, really good at using voiceover narration. Obviously, I know people kind of parody it and, like, make fun of it, but all of his movies that feature voiceover have really good voiceover, and oftentimes it just feels like disconnected poetry being read aloud over the images, and it creates, like, this really, really cool effect. And it works because at no point is the voiceover just, like, saying shit you can see or things that are obvious. The voiceover narration in Ad Astra is close to being as bad as the voiceover narration in the cut of Blade Runner where Harrison Ford is just like fucking corpsing through the movie's narration. Like it's really bad, and the main reason it's so bad is that it's not necessary. Almost every time that Brad Pitt's voiceover says something about the story or about his internal monologue, it's something we could get just from looking at him. Like he's got great facials, you know, he's good at getting things across with his eyes and his everything. So having a moment where he's like making this really, really interesting, complex face, and it's blown up big on a big screen, and we're like looking at it intently to like figure out like what's going on with this guy. You're like, ooh, this is really intriguing. And then to just have his voiceover be like, I was very sad and curious what was going on with my father. And you're like, I mean, dude, we could fucking tell, dog. Like, you know, there's like a scene where they're in the cockpit of the ship and this one guy looks nervous and uneasy. It's like obviously is afraid of doing something. And the voiceover cuts back to Brad Pitt. It's like, he was scared. Like, fucking, we know, man. Like, why did you add this? Like, there are a couple of moments in the movie where there is voiceover that feels semi-necessary, because it's like Brad Pitt's character giving his own commentary on the state of like society, because the movie doesn't have space to show us a lot about what the world is like anymore. It's very hyper-focused on him and his internal monologue stuff and his father and the mission. So there's not a lot of here's what Earth looks like now in the near future. Most of that we get is when we're on the moon and we're understanding what's going on with the pirates and like all the capitalism stuff. So in that scene, having a little bit of narration is not terrible, but even that, the visuals kind of tell the story on its own. You can figure it out. So it's not like it's enhancing the story or making it easier for like dumb people to read or something. Like, it's the visual language is pretty strong. It's pretty clear in my mind. So I don't know if it comes from a place of like narrative insecurity, where you just like you think the audience isn't going to get it, or it tested poorly, so you add voiceover. But what it actually feels like to me is like there were a few bits, because there are a couple of moments where it works, where they thought having voiceover would actually enhance some of the scenes. I can't think of any of these moments offhand, but there are a few moments in the movie where I was not annoyed with the voiceover, and I thought that there was a good like dichotomy between what he was saying internally and what we were seeing, and I liked those moments. But the problem with voiceover narration is if you have a 2-hour movie and you only use it like 4 times, and there's not like a real like symmetry to when and how it's used, it's weird. So what some people do when they write is if they have a couple of really good moments of voiceover that they want to use, they're really into, they just fill in the rest with other voiceover, and that's worse. That's worse than not having it, because then all the other voiceover is not necessary. Like, if you were able to write several good bits of good narration, and then you had a couple of duds or a couple of moments where it was a little intrusive, you could kind of forgive that. But this movie doesn't do that. In particular, because there's multiple scenes of him doing the psych eval stuff, and the change in how he does them from the first few scenes to the later scenes where he's having more difficulty kind of maintaining this mask, and then he's actually letting more of his real thoughts into it, that alone would work the way the voiceover works. It would work way better, because it really shows the journey that he's on, like that he's like kind of coming to terms with all this stuff he's got to let go of so he can actually have meaningful relationships with people. Just having Brad Pitt like looking sad and then him talking about fucking nothing in a droll voice with the occasional cutaway to his ex-girlfriend Liv Tyler, it just does not work at all. You know what I mean? It's really problematic, and it really affects the entire movie. And then also I sort of feel like the movie doesn't quite stick the landing, because there are parts of the movie that are so propulsive and do feel like actually suspenseful and exciting. When we do get to the stuff with his dad at the very end of the movie, it is like thematically satisfying, because like this is the point that Brad Pitt's character needs to come to for the film to come to a close. So like, on an emotional level, I felt good. I was like, okay, this is cool. But like on a psychological level, in some way, I felt like I had been like, because the movie is such a linear 3-act structure kind of thing, I did feel like the movie was building to like a real kind of climax that like it wasn't. Like I knew from jump it wasn't going to go there, but the movie, the rhythms of it made me think it was coming. So like, that sounds very sexual, but I mean like, I don't know, like I wasn't looking for like the tantra element at the end. Like I sort of wanted like there to be like a, like, I don't know, like a, you know, like an exciting thing or something. I don't know what I thought. I didn't think he was gonna like fight his dad or something or like blow up a laser. But the movie itself is pretty propulsive up until the third act, and then it just kind of like fizzles out a little bit. I don't know how I would have done that differently. It's just for me, I was like, oh, okay, well, it's over. That's good. I like it. I love really good endings, and I feel like the ending is just fine. It's just necessary. It works. An ending that works is better than one that doesn't, obviously, but I would have liked something a little stronger than that, I suppose. By the time he gets there and kind of works things out and it comes to the conclusion, I'm not going to spoil the end of the movie. By the time he gets there, it's like, yeah, this is like the logical conclusion of the movie. It's like a good ending, but it's not like a really good ending. And I think a really strong ending would have made up for some of the other complaints I had throughout the film. I think a really good ending, as David Mamet said, should be both surprising and inevitable. It should be something that shocks you, but something that you go, oh, but it couldn't have been any other way. It had to be this. This movie had definitely like an inevitable ending, but it wasn't in any way like surprising, or like it didn't really affect me the way I expected it to. But everything else that the movie did. I love the stuff with Brad. I love the way it sort of like nakedly watches this big movie star playing like a vulnerable man. You're coming to terms with being vulnerable in a really interesting way. And like, again, I get that a movie about a guy going into space to deal with his father issues to some people is very boring and stupid. It has very heavy lyrics to every Everclear song vibes, like I get it. I totally understand. But I do think that's something that's important to explore too. You know what I mean? I feel like if people are going to criticize and talk about the plight of, toxic masculinity, part of unpacking and dealing with those things and getting the culture as a whole to move forward is making art that engages with masculinity and explores it and actually picks it apart and allows men to see films that actually engage with that stuff and maybe help them unlearn certain things, maybe help them feel more vulnerable to do the work on their own in their own time. I don't know how many bros are going to watch Ad Astra and then decide to get into therapy. Probably not very many. But I mean, maybe some people did watch the movie and they came out feeling differently, and they're going to, talk to someone about all their pent up rage and stuff. I think that would be kind of cool. I don't know. I liked that element of the movie. I think that it's cool that James Gray made a movie about a dude going to therapy, but he goes to Neptune to do it. I don't know. I thought that was cool. I just wish there was no narration, and I wish we'd seen a little bit more of the moon pirate war. I thought that was cool. And I mean, maybe this is a movie that's going to get, sort of cult Blade Runner style status for all we know. There's another cut that's way better that people saw last year. Maybe that'll get released theatrically, or at least on Blu-ray or something. Maybe James Gray doesn't seem like a tinkerer, but maybe he'll keep fucking with it for years and release a better version. I don't know. If it happens, I'd love to see it. But yeah, great performance from Brad Pitt. Pretty good performance from Tommy Lee Jones. Ruth Nega's in it. We love her. We love her a lot. Wish she had more screen time. Good score, beautiful cinematography. Just overall, really dope movie. Just really, really heavily marred by like that one persistently intrusive creative decision. If you guys don't mind voiceover, you'll probably love it. For me, it felt like someone was using a power drill in my ear for much of the film. Melodramatic, but true. That's my review of Ad Astra. I think you should see it. I think you should definitely check it out while it's in theaters. I do think you should see it like an IMAX if they have it, or just a really big screen. I saw it on a normal size large screen, and I definitely wish I'd seen it bigger. So if you can, definitely do that. Next week we'll be reviewing, God willing, the other clown movie. So if you guys are looking forward to that, we'll be talking about that. And yeah, that's what's up. So again, thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers by the end of the year. We're at like 335 right now, so like let's keep chugging along with that. If you have already subscribed, please hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I release new videos. Share this video with friends if you have friends who like Brad Pitt, and give it a like if you liked it. Give it a thumbs down if you didn't. That's cool too. And check out one of these other things that I've got posted here. And yeah, have a great weekend, guys. Bye.